Chapter 1. The night the snow took everything's windshield shattered like a scream. Elara Thorne didn't remember the crash itself, only the moment before. The road vanishing under a curtain of white, the steering wheel jerking in her frozen hands, and then the sickening lurch as the SUV slid sideways into darkness. After that, only pain and cold. Cold so complete it felt like drowning in knives. She came to upside down, seatbelt cutting into her shoulder, blood dripping upward into her hair. The engine ticked itself to death somewhere beneath her. Snow poured through the broken window in fat, relentless flakes, already burying the dashboard. Jamie's photograph, the one she kept tucked against the visor, fluttered down like a wounded bird and landed face up in the pooling crimson on the roof liner. Her son's gap-toothed smile stared back at her, mocking and perfect. She tried to reach for it. Her arm wouldn't move right. Something wet and warm slid down her temple. Jamie. The name left her lips as a sob lost to the wind. She had been driving north for 3 days straight, chasing rumors and desperation. A private investigator's cryptic email. A sighting in a nowhere mountain town called Blackpine Ridge. A boy with her eyes and Richard Hawthorne's dark curls. Her ex-husband, billionaire tech mogul, philanthropist on magazine covers, monster behind closed doors, had taken Jamie in a custody war that cost Elara everything. Her savings, her reputation, her sanity. The courts believed Richard's lies. Believed a mother grieving a stillbirth could invent an entire child. Believed money when it spoke in calm, polished tones. But Elara had the birth certificate. She had the scar on her belly. She had for years of memories no judge could erase. She was going to get her son back, even if she had to tear the world apart with her bare hands. Instead, the world tore her dot. Another wave of dizziness crashed over her. The cold was winning. She could feel her heartbeat slowing, each thud farther apart than the last. "I'm sorry, baby," Mommy tried. Then, impossibly, a shadow moved outside the wreckage. At first, she thought it was the snow playing tricks, a trick of dying eyes. But the shadow grew larger, blocking the moonlight, until a massive shape filled the jagged hole where the windshield had been. A wolf, bigger than any wolf had a right to be. Pure white, fur rimed with ice, eyes burning a fierce, unnatural gold. Elara's breath plumed in terror. The beast lowered its great head and sniffed the air above her. Hot breath fogged the inside of the car. Its ears flicked toward the sound of her ragged breathing. She should have screamed. Instead, she whispered, "Please." The wolf's eyes narrowed. Something almost human flickered in them. Sorrow, recognition, rage. Then it reared back and slammed one enormous paw against the doorframe. Metal screamed. The entire driver's side peeled open like a tin can. Cold rushed in. Darkness rushed closer. The last thing Elara felt were teeth, impossibly gentle, closing around the collar of her coat. Then the world tilted, and she was lifted into the night. She never felt the snow again, only warmth. Powerful muscle moving beneath her. The steady thunder of a heart that wasn't hers. And a low, continuous growl that sounded disturbingly like a promise. Hours later, or minutes, time had lost all meaning. The wolf stopped. A cabin emerged from the storm like something out of a dark fairy tale. Log walls silvered with age. Chimney coughing smoke into the blizzard. Windows glowing amber against the endless white. The wolf climbed the porch steps without hesitation, shouldered the door open, and carried her inside. Warmth hit her like a slap. The sense of pine smoke and something wild and masculine flooded her senses. The beast lowered her onto a thick rug before a roaring hearth. Firelight danced over white fur and massive paws. Elara's fingers twitched, wanting to reach out, to touch, to prove this was real. The wolf met her gaze, held it. Then its body shuddered. Bones cracked, fur receded, limbs lengthened in a ripple of impossible motion. In less than a heartbeat, the wolf was gone. A man knelt in its place, naked. Snow melting from broad shoulders, skin bronzed and scarred. Long black hair clung wet to a face carved from granite and grief. Eyes still that impossible gold, now ringed with thick lashes and fixed on her with predatory intensity. He reached for her with hands that trembled, though his voice, when it came, was steady as stone. "Stay with me, little one. You're safe now." Elara tried to speak. Couldn't. Darkness pulled harder. The last thing she saw before unconsciousness claimed her was the man lifting Jamie's photograph from where it had fallen against her chest. His thumb brushed over her son's face with reverence, and something ancient and broken cracked across his features. Then he whispered a single word, raw and reverent, like a prayer and a curse in one, "Mine." And the fire roared higher, as though the cabin itself recognized the claim. Chapter 2. The cabin at the edge of the world snow kept falling in thick, deliberate sheets, as though the mountain itself wanted to bury every trace of the night before. Elara stood at the frost-laced window of the stranger's cabin, arms wrapped tight around herself, watching the world disappear under white. The fire behind her crackled too loud in the silence. Every pop of burning pine made her flinch. She hadn't slept. How could she? A man had carried her through a blizzard like she weighed nothing. A man whose eyes glowed amber in the dark. A man who had looked at the photograph of her and Jamie of the little boy she'd lost and gone. So still she thought the cold had frozen him solid. Footsteps on the wooden floor. Heavy, deliberate. She turned. Caspian Wolfe filled the doorway, shoulders dusted with fresh snow. Dark hair wet and wild from the storm. He wore only a black thermal shirt despite the sub-zero night. Sleeves shoved to the elbows, revealing rope thick for arms scarred and pale. Deliberate lines like claw marks that had healed wrong years ago. He carried an armload of split pine, and the scent of winter clung to him, sharp, clean, and something wild underneath. "You're awake," he said, voice low, rough from disuse. Not a question. "I couldn't sleep." She hugged herself tighter. "You drugged the tea." A flicker across his face guilt. "Maybe. Willow bark and valerian. You were half dead from cold. I wasn't risking fever. You could have asked. You were barely conscious." He crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped the logs by the hearth. Sparks flared. "I don't make a habit of asking permission when someone's lips are turning blue." "Elara." The way he said her name like he'd tasted it before she ever gave it sent heat crawling up her spine despite the chill. She watched him crouch, strong back to her as he fed the fire. Every movement precise, powerful, but careful, like a man used to holding himself back. "You know my name," she said quietly, "but I still don't know yours." He didn't turn. "Caspian. Caspian Wolfe." She tested it. Like the sea, or like the animal. His shoulders tensed, just for a heartbeat. Then he stood, brushing soot from his hands. "Both, I suppose." Silence stretched, thick as the snow outside. She needed answers. Needed to understand why her chest ached every time his eyes met hers. Needed to know why, when he'd carried her last night, she'd felt safe for the first time since the courthouse steps, where Richard's lawyers had torn Jamie from her arms. But the questions tangled on her tongue. Instead, she asked the safest one. "Why do you live out here alone?" Caspian's gaze flicked to the window, to the endless white. "Some people don't belong in towns." That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got right now. Frustration flared. "I woke up in a stranger's bed with no memory of getting here. I deserve more than riddles." He turned then, slowly, and the look on his face stole her breath, something ancient and exhausted, like he'd carried loneliness so long it had carved itself into bone. "You want truth, Elara?" His voice dropped to a growl that vibrated through the floorboards. "I pulled you out of that wreck because I couldn't not. Because the second I smelled your blood in the snow, something in me snapped awake after 10 years of being dead. And I hate it. I hate that you're here. I hate that you're hurt. And I hate that I can't let you leave until the storm breaks." Her heart slammed against her ribs. He took one step closer, then another. until the heat radiating off him chased the chill from her skin. But most of all, he said, voice raw, I hate that you look at me like I'm the answer to something you lost. Because I'm not, Elara. I'm the thing people run from when the moon is full. The fire popped again. A log collapsed in a shower of sparks. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt the first crack in the wall she'd built around her heart the day the judge's gavel fell. Caspian, she whispered, I'm not running. His eyes flashed molten gold, and for one terrifying second she saw the beast looking out at her. Then he shuddered it, jaw clenched so tight she heard his teeth grind. You don't know what you're saying. I know I'm alive because of you. I know you bandaged my head and kept me warm, and her voice cracked. And when you looked at Jamie's picture, you looked like you were going to break. Pain twisted his features. Real, visceral pain. He turned away abruptly, bracing one hand against the log wall, head bowed. Don't do that. Do what? See me. The words came out ragged. Don't see anything good in me. I'm not. He cut himself off, shoulders heaving with a breath that sounded like surrender. Elara took a step toward him, then another, until she stood close enough to see the faint tremor in his outstretched arm. Caspian. He flinched at his name on her lips. I don't know what you are, she said softly, but I know what you did. You saved me, and I'm not afraid of you. A broken laugh escaped him. You should be. Maybe, she allowed, but I'm tired of being afraid. I've been afraid every day since they took my son. His head snapped toward her. The raw anguish in his eyes nearly buckled her knees. I'm going to find him, she said fiercely. Whatever it takes. Even if I have to walk through every blizzard in these mountains. Even if her voice fractured Dot into strides, he closed the distance. Not touching, never touching, but close enough that she felt the heat of him like a promise. You won't walk alone, he said. The words scraped raw. Not anymore. Outside, the wind howled against the cabin like something alive and furious. Dot inside. Two broken things stood inches apart, breathing the same air, tethered by something neither of them understood yet. And somewhere deep in the forest, yellow eyes watched the glowing windows and waited for the moon to rise. Chapter 3. Shadows on the Wolf. Fever came in waves. Elara drifted in and out of dreams where Jamie's laughter echoed through endless white corridors, only to turn and find Richard's cold smile waiting at the end. She woke gasping more than once, certain she was still trapped in the upside-down car. Blood in her eyes, snow in her throat. Each time, a large, calloused hand pressed gently to her forehead, and a low voice rumbled, Breathe, Elara. You're here. You're safe. She wanted to believe the voice. God, she wanted to. On the third morning, or maybe the fourth, time had turned slippery. She opened her eyes to real daylight. Weak, winter-pale light filtered through frost-flowered windows. The room smelled of coffee and wood smoke and something deeper. Pine needles crushed under paw. The memory of storm. Dot. She was in a bed. A real bed. Not the narrow cot she dimly remembered. Thick quilts tucked around her. Flannel soft against her skin. Someone had changed her into an oversized man's shirt. Sleeves rolled a dozen times to free her hands. The fabric carried his scent. She buried her face in the pillow before she could stop herself, breathing him in like an addict. The door creaked. Caspian paused on the threshold, balancing a wooden tray. Steam curled from a bowl of something that smelled like heaven. His hair was tied back to day, revealing the sharp angles of cheekbones and a faint white scar that curved from his left temple into his hairline. He wore a dark Henley, sleeves shoved up again, and the sight of his forearms corded, scarred, strong did something unforgivable to her pulse. You're awake, he said, the same words as the first morning, but softer now. Careful. How long? Her voice cracked like thin ice. For days. He crossed the room with that silent stride and set the tray on the nightstand. Concussion. Hypothermia. 3 cracked ribs. You're lucky to be breathing. She tried to sit up. Pain lanced through her side. She hissed, Easy. He was there in an instant, one hand behind her shoulders, the other supporting the pillows. The heat of him soaked through the thin shirt. Slow. Let me. She hated how much she needed the help. Hated more how safe it felt to let him take her weight. When she was upright, he didn't step away. Just stayed close, studying her face like he was memorizing new damage. I made broth, he said finally. Venison and willow bark tiagayan. Don't argue. I wasn't going to. She managed half a smile. I remember what happened last time I argued about tea. Something flickered in his eyes' relief. Maybe, or darker things. He sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle her, and lifted the spoon. I can feed myself. I know. He didn't move. She stared at him. He stared back, steady, unashamed. There was a challenge in it, but also something raw, a plea she didn't understand yet. Elara opened her mouth and let him feed her. The broth was rich, salty, perfect. Warmth spread through her chest and settled low in her belly. Neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the fire, the wind rattling the shutters, and the soft clink of the spoon against porcelain. When the bowl was empty, he set it aside but didn't rise. Your son, he said quietly. Jamie. Her breath caught. I wasn't prying. He continued, voice rough. The picture fell out of your coat. I put it on the dresser so it wouldn't get ruined. She followed his gaze. There, beside a battered leather journal and a wolf carved from obsidian, stood the photograph in a simple wooden frame she'd never seen before. Someone him had cleaned the blood from the glass. Emotion clogged her throat. Thank you. He nodded once, jaw tight. Silence stretched again, heavier this time. She found herself studying the room. Hand-hewn beams, books stacked everywhere, field guides, mythology, poetry. A rifle above the mantel. No photographs except hers. No evidence anyone else had ever lived here. Caspian, she said softly. He met her eyes. Why do you look at his picture like you know him? His whole body went still. Not tense still. Like a wolf scenting danger on the wind. I don't, he said at last. The words were careful. Too careful. You do. She reached out without thinking. Fingers brushing the back of his hand where it rested on the quilt. His skin burned hot. I saw it that first night, when you thought I was unconscious. He turned his hand palm up beneath hers, a reflex he seemed to regret immediately. But he didn't pull away. I lost someone, he said, so low she almost missed it. A long time ago. A boy. He would be. About your son's age now. The air left her lungs. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be. His thumb moved, just once, tracing the inside of her wrist where her pulse fluttered. Some things can't be fixed. Some debts can't be paid. His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingered, then wrenched back to her eyes. I shouldn't. He stopped, swallowed. You need rest. He started to rise. Caspian. He froze. Stay, she said. Just sit with me. A little longer. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Something wild and wounded flashed across his face. Then he sank back down, shoulders curved like he was bracing for a blow. She shifted over, wincing, and patted the space beside her. There's room, Elara. Please. He toed off his boots with reluctant obedience and stretched out on top of the quilt, careful to leave inches between them. But the bed was small, and he was huge. Heat rolled off him in waves. She turned onto her good side to face him. Their faces were close enough that she could see gold flecks in his irises. Count the tiny scars on his lower lip. Tell me something true, she whispered. He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. I dream in howls, he said finally. Every night. And lately. They sound like a child crying. Her heart fractured. Without thinking, she slid her hand into his. His fingers closed around hers instantly, fiercely, like he'd been waiting years for the anchor outside. The storm raged on, sealing them off from the world inside. Two broken souls lay side by side, pretending the space between them was only inches and not entire lifetimes of grief. But the bond, the terrifying, impossible pull tightened another notch dot, and deep in the forest, something ancient stirred, scenting blood and mate and vengeance on the wind. Chapter 4. The weight of unspoken names storm finally broke on the 6th night. Elara woke to silence so complete it rang in her ears. Moonlight poured through the window in a silver blade, painting the room in stark contrasts. The dark hollows beneath Caspian's eyes, the white scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the way his hand still cradled hers even in sleep. He had not left the bed since she asked him to stay. Not truly. He rose to tend the fire, to bring her broth or tea, to change the dressing on the gash above her temple. But always he returned. Always the space between them shrank a little more. Tonight he slept on his back, one arm flung above his head, the other locked around her fingers as though afraid she would vanish if he let go. The flannel shirt had ridden up on her thighs. One of his heavy legs had slipped between hers sometime in the night, pinning her gently, possessively. She could feel the steady drum of his pulse in his wrist, faster than human, stronger. She studied his face in the moonlight. In sleep the ferocity softened. He looked younger, almost vulnerable. A lock of black hair had fallen across his cheek. Without thinking, she reached to brush it away. His eyes snapped open gold, luminous. Instantly awake, Elara froze. For a heartbeat neither moved. Then his thumb stroked across her knuckles, slow, deliberate. "You're hurting," he murmured, voice gravel and smoke. "I'm fine." You whimpered in your sleep. She swallowed. Nightmare. He shifted onto his side, facing her fully. The movement brought their bodies flush chest to chest, hip to hip. Heat flared everywhere they touched. "Tell me," he said. She tried to look away. He cupped her cheek with his free hand, gentle but unyielding, forcing her gaze back to his. "Richard," she whispered. The name tasted like rust. He was taking Jamie again. I was screaming, but no sound came out. And you weren't there. Something savage flickered across Caspian's face. His grip tightened, not on her skin, but on the quilt beneath them, knuckles whitening. "I'm here now," he said, the words rough with restraint. "And no one will take anything from you again. Not while I breathe." The certainty in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it settled warm and solid in her chest, like a stone dropped into still water. "Caspian." She wet her lips. "When you carried me through the storm, I thought I dreamed the wolf." His entire body went rigid. "I didn't," she continued, voice barely above the crackle of dying embers. "I felt fur against my cheek. I smelled winter on its breath. And then there was a man holding Jamie's picture like it was sacred." His eyes searched hers, wild and wary. "I'm not asking you to explain," she said quickly. "Not yet. Just don't lie to me, please." A tremor ran through him. He pressed his forehead to hers, breath ragged. "I have never lied to you, Elara," he rasped. "I've withheld. I've evaded. But every word I've given you has been true." She felt the truth of it in her bones. His next words were so soft she almost missed them. "I am more than I seem, and less than I wish I was." The confession hung between them, fragile as frost. She lifted her hand, the one not trapped in his, and laid it over his heart. It thundered beneath her palm, fierce and alive. "I don't care," she said. "I don't care what you are." A broken sound escaped him. He turned his face into her hair, inhaling like a drowning man breaking the surface. "You will," he whispered against her temple. "When you see the whole of it, you will? Then let me see." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "When I'm stronger, when the snow stops, show me all of you, Caspian Wolfe. I'm not made of glass." His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingered. "Careful, little one," he said, voice shaking with something that sounded like prayer. "Some truths have teeth." Before she could answer, he rolled away fast. Controlled Dan was on his feet beside the bed, Moonlight carved him in silver and shadow, every muscle taut. The storms ended. He said without looking at her, "Tomorrow I'll take you down the mountain. There's a ranger stationed 20 miles south. They'll have phones. You can call whoever you need." The words landed like stones in her stomach. He was giving her an escape. She sat up slowly, ribs protesting. "And if I don't want to leave?" He flinched as if she'd struck him. "This isn't a place for you," he said to the window. "This isn't a life. You don't get to decide that for me." He turned then, and the raw desperation in his eyes stole her breath. "I decide what monsters you're exposed to," he growled, "and I am the worst one here." Silence crashed over them. Elara slid from the bed, bare feet hitting cold wood. Pain shot through her side, but she ignored it, crossing the small space until she stood toe-to-toe with him. He towered over her, yet somehow she felt taller. "Look at me," she said. His gaze dropped to hers. "Tormented. I have spent for years being told what I can and cannot survive," she said, voice steady as steel. "By judges, by doctors, by a man who smiled while he stole my child. I am done letting other people decide my limits." She reached up and laid both palms against his chest. His heart slammed against her hands like it wanted out. "I'm staying," she said, "until I'm healed, until I know what this is between us. And then if you still want me gone, I'll go. But not before." His hands rose, hovered over her shoulders, then settled lightly, reverently, as though she were spun glass after all. "You have no idea what you're asking," he breathed. "Then show me." She rose on tiptoe until their lips were a whisper apart. "Trust me enough to let me choose." For one endless second, the world held its breath. Then he made a sound half groan, half snarl and crushed her to him. Not a kiss, not yet. Just arms like iron bands and a shudder that racked his entire frame. She felt his lips against her hair, her temple, the corner of her eye frantic, worshipful. "Elara," he said, her name breaking on his tongue. "God help us both." Outside, the moon hung full and merciless above the newly silent forest. And somewhere in the dark, a lone howl rose ancient, grieving, and hungry. Caspian's head snapped toward the window. Body going predator still. Elara felt the change in him like a storm front rolling in. "They've found us," he whispered. Chapter 5. The howl at the door howl came again, closer, threaded with something that made the hairs on Elara's arms rise. Not just hunger, recognition. Caspian's arms tightened around her for one fierce heartbeat. Then he set her away from him with deliberate care, as though she were made of blown glass and dynamite at once. "Stay inside," he said. The gentleness was gone. The voice that spoke now belonged to something older than the man. "Lock the door behind me." "No." The word left her before fear could stop it. "You don't get to shove me behind a wall the first time something knocks." His eyes flashed molten gold. "Elara, I'm not fragile, and I'm not useless." She stepped forward until the heat of him burned through her borrowed shirt. "Whatever's out there came after the storm broke. That means it followed one of us. I deserve to know which." A muscle jumped in his jaw. Another howl split the night, answered by two more lower, rougher, threaded with menace. Caspian swore under his breath, an ancient word that didn't belong to any human language she knew. "Stay behind me," he ordered. "No matter what you see, no matter what I do, swear it." She nodded once. He moved like smoke barefoot, silent, crossing the room to pull a long knife from a sheath above the mantel. Moonlight slid along the blade, iron on one edge, silver on the other. He slid it into the waistband at the small of his back, then unbolted the door. Cold rushed in, sharp with pine and blood. Elara followed him onto the porch. The clearing around the cabin lay virgin and white, moonlight turning every surface to frozen fire. Tracks marred the snow massive paw prints, deeper than any dog, leading straight to the steps and stopping 10 feet away. 3 wolves waited at the tree line. One gray, one black, one the color of dried blood. All huge, all staring at Caspian with eyes that held too much intelligence. The gray stepped forward, and the air shimmered around it like heat over asphalt. Bones cracked, fur receded, and a man stood where the wolf had been tall, lean, naked to the waist despite the cold. Old scars crisscrossed his chest like a map of every fight he'd survived. Caspian, the stranger said, voice calm but edged with iron. The council felt the bond snap into place. They sent me to remind you of the law. Caspian's answering growl vibrated through the porch boards into Elara's bare feet. Tell the council they can choke on their law, he said. She's under my protection. The stranger's gaze slid to Elara. Something flickered their surprise. Then calculation. A human, he murmured, and the bond sings loud enough to wake the dead. Curious. Elara's heart slammed against her ribs. Bond. She felt it to the invisible tether that had tightened every time Caspian touched her. Every time he looked at her like she was both salvation and ruin. The man tilted his head. Does she even know what you are? Alpha? Alpha? The word punched the air from her lungs. Caspian moved, placing himself between her and the wolves so fast she felt the wind of it. She will, he said, when I decide she's ready. Not before, and not by force. The stranger smiled, all teeth. The full moon is tomorrow night. You know the penalty for hiding a potential mate from the pack. Potential mate. The world tilted. Elara grabbed the porch rail to stay upright. Caspian's shoulders blocked her view, but she heard the snarl that tore from his throat in human, utterly feral. Touch her, he said, voice dropping to something that made the snow itself seem to recoil. And I will end you and every wolf that follows you. There won't be enough left for the crows. Silence fell, thick and dangerous. Then the stranger inclined his head, mock respectful. 24 hours, Caspian. Bring her to the circle. Let the pack see what the moon has chosen, or we come for you both. He shifted back to Wolf in a ripple of muscle and moonlight, and the three melted into the trees as silently as they'd come. The clearing felt suddenly too large, too exposed. Elara's legs gave out. She would have fallen if Caspian hadn't spun and caught her, lifting her against his chest like she weighed nothing. Inside, he slammed the door, threw the bolt, and stood there breathing hard, forehead pressed to the wood. Alpha. Mate. Pack. The words circled her mind like wolves themselves. He turned slowly. Moonlight carved hollows beneath his eyes. Elara, he began, voice raw. She held up a hand. Don't apologize for existing. He laughed once broken, disbelieving, and crossed to her into strides, cupped her face in trembling hands. I wanted to tell you slowly, he said. Give you time to run if you needed to. I never wanted you dragged into this. I'm not running. She covered his hands with hers. But I need the truth. All of it. Tonight, his eyes searched hers, desperate, ancient, terrified. Then he nodded once. He led her to the hearth, sat her on the rug, and knelt before her like a supplicant. My full name, he said quietly, is Caspian Wolfe, Alpha of the Blackpine pack, exiled 10 years ago for a crime the council will never forgive. He took her hands, turned them palm up, and laid them over his heart. I am Wolf-born. The moon is my mother and my jailer. Tomorrow night she will be full, and I will have no choice but to change. If you stay near me then, the bond will try to finish what it started. It will mark you as mine in ways that can never be undone. His voice cracked. And if the pack decides a human cannot stand at an alpha's side, they will kill you to break me. Elara stared at him, at the proud, broken man kneeling at her feet, offering her every sharp truth like a blade turned toward his own throat. She leaned forward until their foreheads touched. Then we'd better make sure the pack understands one thing, she whispered. What's that? She kissed him. Not soft, not gentle. A claiming born of fury and grief and for days of borrowed warmth finally spilling over. Caspian made a wounded sound and kissed her back like a starving thing, hands sliding into her hair. angling her head so he could devour her mouth. She tasted pine and smoke, and the faint copper of fear held back too long. When they broke apart, both shaking, she rested her lips against his jaw and said the words that sealed both their fates. "I'm not just some human, Caspian. I'm the mother of the boy you lost. And tomorrow night, I'm going to stand in that circle and dare any wolf to take what's mine." Outside, the moon climbed higher, fat and merciless. Inside, a wolf and a woman held each other in the firelight, hearts racing toward a reckoning neither could escape. Chapter 6. The mark that was already there. Fire had burned low. A nest of ruby coals that painted the cabin in blood and shadow. Elara sat cross-legged on the bearskin rug, Caspian's massive shirt swallowing her frame. Sleeves rolled to her elbows. Across from her, Caspian knelt shirtless, the dying light licking over old scars and new tension. Neither of them had spoken in nearly an hour. He had told her everything quietly, relentlessly. The curse that lived in Blackpine blood. The night 10 years ago when he had lost control and killed 3 humans to protect a child. The pack had deemed unworthy. The exile that followed. The boy his nephew. Rowan, who had vanished the same night. Presumed dead by the council. Mourned by Caspian every moon since. And the bond. The ancient, unbreakable thing that had snapped taut the moment he scented her blood in the snow. A mate bond, rare as star iron, impossible to fake or force. The moon did not ask permission. Elara listened without flinching. When he finished, voice scraped raw. She simply crawled across the rug and settled between his knees, resting her head over his heart. He had trembled then, arms closing around her like she was the only solid thing left in his world. Now the silence stretched again. Thick with everything still unsaid. She traced a pale claw mark that curved beneath his collarbone. "This one, Silver Blade," he murmured against her hair. "My father, the night he named me Alpha." Her fingers moved lower to a puckered burn on his ribs. "And this?" "Rowan," he said, voice cracking on the boy's name. He was 4. Thought matches were toys. I caught him before the flames reached the curtains. Took the burn so he wouldn't. Elara's throat closed. She pressed her lips to the scar, tasting salt and smoke and 10 years of guilt. "I dream about him too," she whispered. "Jamie. Sometimes I wake up reaching for a little boy who isn't there. Sometimes I swear I hear him calling me from the trees." Caspian's arms tightened until she could barely breathe. "I used to think the worst thing was losing him," she continued, voice trembling. "But tonight I realized something worse. What if he's alive? What if Richard hid him somewhere no one would ever look? What if he's waiting for a mother who gave up?" She pulled back just enough to meet Caspian's eyes. Tears tracked silently down her cheeks. "I'm terrified the bomb chose me because I'm broken in all the same places you are." A ragged sound tore from his chest. He cupped her face, thumbs wiping the tears away only for more to fall. "Listen to me," he said fiercely. "The moon doesn't choose broken things to punish us. She chooses them because only the shattered can recognize their own shape in someone else." He took her right hand and pressed it flat against the center of his chest, directly over his heart. Beneath her palm, his skin burned fever hot. "Feel this?" he said. "It's been silent for 10 years. A wolf who loses his pack, his pup, whose purpose he goes quiet inside. I was a ghost wearing fur. Then I found you bleeding in the snow, and this started again." His heart slammed against her hand. "Wild and alive. You woke me up, Elara. Not the bond. You." She turned her face into his neck, breathing him in, letting the scent of pine and storm anchor her. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "I know." He kissed her temple, her cheekbone, the corner of her mouth soft, reverent. "But fear doesn't get to decide this. We do." He reached behind his neck and unclasped something she hadn't noticed before, a leather cord with a single wolf's tooth, yellowed with age and capped in silver. This was Rowan's milk tooth, he said quietly. The only thing I saved from that night. I swore I'd never give it away. Not until I found someone who would fight for him the way I couldn't. He slipped the cord over her head. The tooth settled between her breasts, warm from his skin. Wear it tomorrow, he said. When we walk into the circle, let them see that you carry my dead with you. Let them see that you are not prey. Elara closed her fist around the tooth. It felt like taking an oath. I will, she vowed. Caspian's eyes flared gold, fierce and proud. He leaned in until their lips brushed not a kiss, a promise. Sleep now, he whispered. Tomorrow night the moon rises at 9:17. We'll face them together. She meant to argue, to demand more answers, but exhaustion and the steady beat of his heart dragged her under. When she woke hours later, the fire was dead and moonlight flooded the room like spilled milk. Caspian stood at the window, naked to the waist, staring out at the forest. The muscles of his back rippled with every breath, tension carved into every line. She slipped from the bed and padded to him. Without a word, she wrapped her arms around him from behind, pressing her cheek between his shoulder blades. He covered her hands with his, anchoring them to his skin. They're gathering, he said quietly. I can feel them. 30, maybe 40 wolves. The entire pack. Elara closed her eyes and listened. Beneath the ordinary night sounds whined. Distant owl she caught it, a low, rhythmic thrum, like a second heartbeat in the earth itself. The circle, he continued. It's an old place. Standing stones on the ridge. Tomorrow they'll demand I prove the bond is real. They'll demand you prove you're strong enough to stand at my side. He turned in her arms, cupping her face. If you want to leave before dawn, I'll take you. I'll fight them all to buy you time. Say the word, and you'll never have to see another wolf again. Elara rose on tiptoe and kissed him slow, deliberate, pouring every ounce of certainty she possessed into it. When she pulled back, her voice did not shake. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, she said. And tomorrow night, your pack is going to learn what happens when someone tries to take a mother's child twice. Caspian's eyes blazed. He lifted her off her feet, crushing her to him until she felt every shuddering breath. Outside, the moon hung swollen and low, 1 night away from full dot inside. A wolf and his mate held each other in the dark, trading pieces of broken hearts like armored dot, and on the ridge above, unseen, a small shadow watched the cabin bare feet in the snow. Dark curls, eyes the exact shade of Elara's. The boy tilted his head, listening to something only he could hear. Then he smiled, turned, and vanished into the trees toward the circle. Toward tomorrow, toward a reckoning 10 years in the making. Chapter 7. The last night before the moon dawn came cold and colorless. A thin gray light that felt like the world holding its breath. Elara stood on the porch in Caspian's coat, the sleeves swallowing her hands, the hem brushing her thighs. The forest was silent, no birds, no wind, only the crunch of snow under Caspian's boots as he loaded a pack with things she could not name. Dried meat, a silver flask, bundles of herbs that smelled sharp and medicinal. Every motion was precise, economical, the movements of a soldier preparing for war. She watched him and felt the bonds from between them like a second heartbeat, steady, insistent, terrified. He had not slept. She had pretended to, curled against his side, counting the minutes by the rise and fall of his chest. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of wolves circling a ring of stones while a little boy stood in the center, arms outstretched, calling her name in a voice that cracked with tears. She woke with the taste of dread on her tongue. Now Caspian straightened, slung the pack over one broad shoulder, and met her eyes across the clearing. Ready? He asked. No. Never. Yes, she said. He crossed to her in 3 strides and cupped her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones as if memorizing the shape of her courage. Whatever happens tonight, he said, voice rough, you walk in there as my mate. Head high, no fear sent. They'll test you, but they will not break you. She leaned into his touch. And if they try, His smile was all teeth and winter. Then they learn why I was exiled. He kissed her then, not soft, not gentle, acclaiming, they vow. His mouth moved over hers like a storm breaking open, and she kissed him back with everything she had left: grief, fury, hope, love to new and raw to name. When they parted, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. I need to show you something, he whispered. Before we go, he took her hand and led her round the cabin to a small lean-to shed. Inside, sheltered from snow, stood a wooden cross driven into the frozen earth. No name, just a single word carved deep: Rowan. Beneath it lay a child-sized wool coat, faded red, carefully folded. A toy truck, one wheel missing. A tiny mitten frozen stiff. Elara's knees buckled. Caspian caught her, held her up. I come here every full moon, he said against her hair. I sit until the shift takes me, and I beg him to forgive me for failing him. Tonight the moon will force the truth out of me in front of the entire pack. I needed you to see this first, so you know exactly what kind of monster you're choosing. She turned in his arms and framed his face with trembling hands. You didn't fail him, she said fiercely. You're still fighting. That's not failure, Caspian. That's love that refused to die. Something shattered behind his eyes. He dropped to his knees in the snow, arms wrapped around her waist, face buried against her stomach. His shoulders shook with silent, violent sobs, the first tears he had allowed himself in 10 years. Elara threaded her fingers through his hair and held him while the sky lightened above them, while the forest waited, while the moon counted down the hours. Eventually he stood, wiped his face with the back of one hand, and the alpha was back in place, hard, cold, unbreakable. But his eyes stayed soft when they looked at her. Come, he said. There's one more thing. They hiked in our through knee-deep snow to a frozen waterfall. Ice cascaded in jagged blue curtains, catching the weak sunlight like stained glass. At its base lay a circle of stones, each carved with runes that made Elara's skin prickle. This is where I was born, Caspian said quietly. Where every Blackpine alpha is born. The pack will expect us to arrive through here tonight. Tradition. He knelt, brushed snow from the largest stone, and pressed his palm to it. Warmth flared beneath his hand. The runes glowed faint silver. I was going to bring Rowan here on his 10th birthday, he said. Teach him what it means to carry this blood. Instead, I brought you. He pulled the silver-edged knife from his belt and, without hesitation, sliced a thin line across his palm. Blood-welled, dark, and steaming in the cold. He turned her hand over and cut a matching line across her palm before she could protest. Then he pressed their bleeding palms together and wrapped them tight with a strip of leather from his pocket. Blood to blood, he said, voice shaking with ritual and something deeper. Moon witness. Until the stars burn out, I am yours. Your pain is my pain. Your fight is my fight. Your sun is my sun. The runes flared brighter. Wind howled through the ice curtains, though no breeze touched them. Elara felt the bond snap tighter, a golden thread winding around her heart and lungs until she could barely breathe. Without feeling him inside her chest, tears blurred her vision. Say it back, he whispered. She swallowed hard. Blood to blood. Moon witness. Until the stars burn out, I am yours. Your pain is my pain. Your fight is my fight. Your pack is my pack. And Rowan, her voice broke. Rowan will come home. The light died. The wind stilled. Caspian kissed the leather binding their hands, then kissed her mouth, slow and reverent. When they pulled apart, the sun was high and weak, and the day felt suddenly too short. They hiked back in silence, hands still tied, leaving a single trail of crimson drops in the snow. At the cabin, Caspian cooked venison and fed her by hand while she sat on the counter, legs swinging. Neither spoke of what came after sunset. Instead, they touched constantly, her fingers in his hair, his thumb tracing her wrist, small, grounding things that said, I'm still here. When dusk bled across the sky, He dressed her in layers of his own clothes, buckled a knife at her thigh, and braided her hair with steady fingers. "Remember," he said, tying the end with a strip of red wool, "you are not human tonight. You are the alpha's mate. You bow to no one." She nodded, throat too tight for words. He shouldered the pack, took her unbound hand, and led her into the darkening forest. Behind them, the cabin door swung shut on silent hinges. Ahead, torches already flickered on the ridge 30 flames, maybe more, and the low thunder of drums rolled down the mountain like a heartbeat. The circle waited, and somewhere in the trees, small bare feet followed, keeping perfect pace. Unseen and unheard, the boy's eyes glowed soft gold in the gathering dark. He was smiling. Chapter 8. The circle of fire and fanged path to the ridge was lit by torches driven into the snow. Every 20 feet, flames hissing against the cold. Each torch was bound with wolf-gray ribbon soaked in pitch and something sharper blood. Elara realized. The scent of it clung to the back of her throat. Caspian walked one step ahead, never releasing her hand. His spine was straight, shoulders squared, but she felt the tremor that ran through him every time another howl rose from the circle ahead. Not fear, recognition. Homecoming and dread braided so tightly they had become the same thing. At the crest, the forest opened into a natural bowl ringed by 13 standing stones taller than a man. Between the stones, wolves waited, some in fur, some in skin easily 40 souls. Torches ringed the inside of the circle, throwing light upwards so faces looked carved from fire and shadow. Eyes reflected gold, amber, ice-dashed blue dot. The drums stopped the instant Caspian stepped into the ring. Silence fell like an axe. An old woman stood at the far side on a slab of granite that served as a dais. Silver hair braided with bones, eyes milky yet seeing everything. The council's voice. Behind her stood the 3 wolves who had come to the cabin the night before. Now in human form, arms crossed. Watching the woman lifted one gnarled hand. "Caspian Wolfe," she called, voice carrying without effort. "Exiled Alpha. You bring a human into the circle on the eve of the full moon. Explain." Caspian's grip on Elara's hand tightened until bones creaked. He stepped forward, pulling her with him until they stood dead center, torchlight painting them in blood and gold. "I bring my mate," he said, and the words rang like a war horn. A ripple went through the pack, growls, gasps, shifting feet. Someone spat on the ground. The old woman's blind eyes fixed on Elara. "Step forward, girl." Caspian started to move with her. The woman's hand sliced the air. Alone, Elara felt Caspian's panic flare down the bond. Sharp as broken glass. She squeezed his fingers. "Once trust me," and walked forward until she stood beneath the dais. The heat of 40 stairs burned her skin. "Name yourself," the woman commanded. "Elara Thorne." Her voice did not shake. "Mate to Caspian Wolfe by blood and moon. Mother to Jamie Thorne. And I will burn this mountain down before I let anyone take another child from me." A low growl circled the ring. The old woman tilted her head, listening to something only she could hear. "You smell of grief," she said finally. "And of him. The bond is true. That cannot be denied. But law is law. A human may not stand at the Alpha's side unless she survives the ordeal." Caspian's snarl cracked the night open. "She will not." "I accept." Elara cut across him. The pack stilled. Even the torches seemed to lean in. Caspian spun her to face him, fingers digging into her arms. "No, there are 3 trials. The last one." "I know what the last one is," she said quietly. "I felt you dreaming it." His face went white beneath the torchlight. The old woman smiled without warmth. "Then let the ordeal begin. First trial, blood." They brought forward a silver bowl filled with dark liquid wolf's blood mixed with moonlight-blessed water. Elara had to drink without flinching while every wolf in the circle breathed her scent, judging whether she carried deceit. She lifted the bowl with steady hands and drank. It tasted of iron and forest and ancient nights. The pack inhaled as one. No one moved to stop her. Second trial. Truth. The old woman stepped down from the stone and laid one palm over Elara's heart, the other over Caspian's. Speak your deepest shame, she said. The moon hears lies and punishes them. Caspian's voice came first, raw and ragged. I killed to protect a child the pack called abomination. I would kill again. I have never regretted the blood on my hands, only that it wasn't enough to save him. Gasps. Growls of rage. The woman's blind eyes turned to Elara. She did not look at the pack, only at Caspian. I let them take my son, she said, tears sliding hot down cold cheeks. I signed the papers because I was too broken to fight anymore. I wake every morning hating the woman who gave up. I will not give up tonight. Silence thicker than the snow. The woman removed her hands. Truth spoken. The moon is satisfied. Third trial. The old woman raised both arms. The claiming. Every torch snuffed out at once. Darkness swallowed the circle. Elara felt Caspian shift beside her, heard the tear of cloth. The low growl that was no longer human. A massive white wolf stood where he had been. Shoulders leveled with her chest, hackles raised. Lips peeled back from fangs longer than her fingers. The pack answered. One by one, they shifted, until the circle brimmed with wolves gray, black, red, white circling, snarling, eyes glowing in the sudden dark. The full moon crested the ridge behind them, huge and merciless, spilling silver across the snow. The old woman's voice rose like a blade. Let the alpha prove his mate is worthy. Let the pack test her courage. If she stands until the moon sets behind the western stone, she is Blackpine. If she falls, she did not need to finish. The first wolf lunged, a huge black brute with a scarred muzzle. Caspian met it midair. They crashed together in a fury of teeth and claws. Blood sprayed across the snow. Dark as ink. Another attacked from the left. Elara screamed Caspian's name. He fought like a demon, tearing throats, breaking bones. But there were too many. They were not trying to kill him, only to reach her. A reddish wolf broke past, jaws wide for her throat. Elara drew the silver-edged knife Caspian had buckled to her thigh and slashed upward. The blade bit deep. Hot blood splashed her face. The wolf yelped and fell back. More came. She fought beside Caspian, back to back. Human and wolf moving as one creature. The bond blazed white-hot between them, guiding her blade, lending her his strength. She felt his pain as her own, his rage, his desperate love. Time dissolved into snarls and copper and moonlight. And then a child's voice, clear and impossible, cutting through the chaos. Stop. Every wolf froze. Elara's heart stopped with them. A small boy stood at the edge of the circle, barefoot in the snow, dark curls wild, eyes glowing soft gold. In his hand he held the red wool ribbon Caspian had tied in Elara's hair that afternoon. Rowan? Caspian's broken whisper cracked the night in half. The boy smiled Jamie's smile. Elara realized with a lurch. The same gap where a front tooth had been. Hi, Uncle Cass, the boy said. Mommy's bleeding. You should help her. Chapter 9. The Moon's Mercy. Final chapter. The circle held its breath. 40 wolves, frozen mid-snarl, blood dripping from muzzles and claws, stared at the impossible child standing barefoot in the snow. The moon hung directly overhead now, swollen and perfect, washing the world in silver so pure it felt like judgment. Caspian shifted back to man in a single ripple of muscle and moonlight. He stood naked and bleeding, chest heaving, eyes wide with something beyond hope. Rowan. The name came out cracked, reverent, terrified. The boy's smile widened. He took one step, then another, small feet leaving no prints in the snow. In the silence, Elara heard her own heartbeat, hers and Caspian's, and the child's 3 rhythms weaving into one. She looked closer. The boy's eyes were Caspian's, gold ringed with her own storm gray. The shape of his mouth, the stubborn tilt of his chin Jamie's. But the way he held himself, the quiet power radiating from a 10-year-old frame, belonged to an alpha born. Rowan stopped between Caspian and Elara, reached up, and took one of their hands in each of his. I had to wait, he said simply, voice carrying to the farthest stone. The moon said I had to wait until you both learned how to fight for me. Elara's knees gave out. She sank into the snow, tears streaming hot down frozen cheeks. Jamie? She whispered. Baby? He turned to her, and for the first time the child mask slipped. 10 years of loneliness and waiting looked out of those ancient eyes. I never stopped being both. He said, Rowan for the pack. Jamie for you? I had to hide until the bond was strong enough to protect us all. Caspian made a sound like a dying thing and dropped to his knees, arms open. Rowan Jamie launched himself into them. Caspian crushed the boy to his chest, sobbing without shame. Great wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. Elara crawled forward and wrapped her arms around them both, pressing her face into soft curls that smelled of pine and little boy warmth and home. I'm sorry. She choked. I'm so sorry I let them take you. You didn't let anyone take me, Rowan said fiercely, pulling back to cup her wet cheeks with small, blood-streaked hands. Richard tried. The moon stopped him. She sent me into the storm the night Uncle Cass lost everything. She hid me in the pack, in plain sight. A lost pup no one claimed. I grew up waiting for my mother to be strong enough to find me, and for my alpha to be brave enough to love again. He looked at Caspian then, eyes shining. I forgave you a long time ago, Uncle Cass. You have to forgive yourself now. Caspian's face crumpled. He pressed kiss after kiss to the boy's hair, murmuring broken endearments in the old tongue. The old woman, the voice stepped forward slowly, tears tracking through the ash painted on her cheeks. The moon has spoken, she declared, voice trembling with awe. The lost son returns. The bond is sealed in blood and fire and child. There is no ordeal left to give. She knelt at an old wolf kneeling to a child and bowed her head. Welcome home, little Alpha. One by one, every wolf in the circle followed. 40 heads lowered, 40 throats bared in submission. Rowan Jamie looked at his parents, eyes bright with mischief and joy. I believe, he said solemnly, this is the part where you kiss and everybody cheers. Laughter broke from Elara's throat, raw and disbelieving. Caspian met her gaze over their son's head, and the love there was so fierce it stole what little breath she had left. He leaned across the small space and kissed her slow, reverent, tasting of blood and tears and 10 years of grief finally laid to rest. She kissed him back with everything she was, everything she had become in the snow and fire of these mountains. When they parted, the pack was on its feet again, howling not challenge, but welcome. A song of return that shook snow from the pines and sent it drifting down like blessings. Much later, after clothes were found and wounds bandaged, after the circle became a celebration with bonfires and shared meat and stories told until dawn, the three of them walked back to the cabin under a sky beginning to pale. Rowan, because that was the name he asked them to use when it was just family, walked between them, holding both their hands. He chattered about secret dens and moonlit games and the wolf, who taught him to track deer by starlight. His voice never stopped, as though 10 years of silence had finally been allowed to spill over. At the cabin door, he paused and looked up at the sky. The moon says thank you, he told them solemnly. She was lonely too. Then he yawned, small and human and perfect, and Caspian swung him up into his arms. The boy's head drooped instantly against his uncle's father's shoulder, asleep before they crossed the threshold. Elara watched Caspian carry their son to the bed that had once been only grief and loneliness, watched him tuck blankets round small shoulders with infinite care. When he straightened, his eyes were red but steady. He opened his arms. She walked into them without hesitation. Against her hair he whispered, "We're a family." "Yes," she said, voice fierce through tears. "We are." Outside, the first pale light of morning crept over the ridge, gilding the snow in rose and gold. The storm that had started everything was only a memory now. Inside the cabin, a wolf, a woman, and the child who had been lost and found curled together on a bed built for two, but somehow big enough for three. The bond thrummed between them golden, unbreakable, complete dot, and for the first time in 10 years. Caspian Wolfe fell asleep without dreaming of howls Dottie dreamed. Instead of laughter echoing through sunlit trees, of small bare feet racing across summer grass, of a woman with storm gray eyes smiling at him like he was the answer to every prayer she'd ever had. Somewhere far away, Richard Hawthorne's empire would crumble when the truth came out when a boy presumed. Dead walked into court holding his mother's hand, and an alpha wolf stood at her back. But that was a battle for another day. Tonight, the moon looked down on Blackpine Ridge, and for once, was content. The lost had come home. The broken had been made whole, and love, wild, feral, fated had won.